I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you. My name is Ramesh Konda. I am the President of Indo-American Community Federation, IACF. We are hosting the annual Unity Dinner today. This is the 21st annual Unity Dinner. So we have the program booklet on each of the tables. Please refer to the booklet which has the description of the program today and sequence and the timing. So we will try to stick to the time as much as possible. So please bear with us and thank you again for being with us on a Friday evening. It's going to be a wonderful program today. So I would like to invite Shaila Jutsi. She is the granddaughter of our Jivan Jutsi. Jivan Jutsi is well known, no intro is required. He is the founder and chairman of the IACF. So I would like to invite our Shaila, 8-year-old, emerging youth leader. She has the dynamism and also leadership skills, and she is the emerging young child here who is going to introduce our panel discussion. Please give a round of applause to Shaila. Please come on here. So Shaila is going to introduce the panel.
Good evening. My name is Shaila Zutti, and I am 8 years old. I am delighted to be here tonight to introduce the panel, The Rise in Gun Violence. When people have asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, it's always 3 things: a singer, the First Lady President, and an activist to stop gun violence. When I found out about the topic on tonight's panel, I was a little uneasy. I was a little uneasy and a little excited. I was glad the conversation was happening, but sad that it is so needed. I have had to do lockdown drills at school this year, and they left me feeling scared and upset. I know my parents didn't do them when they were kids, and it's been disturbing that it's just the way things are now. I hope by the time I'm old enough to be an activist, things have improved. And school shootings is a thing of the past. But until then, I can't think of a more important topic to reflect upon. With that, I'd like to introduce Anjali Zutti, the moderator of the panel. Anjali is an attorney at the Department of Energy, National Nuclear Security Administration, advising clients on national security and intelligence matters related to nuclear weapons. She began her career as a litigator at a large law firm, also detailed as a special assistant U.S. attorney at the Department of Justice, prosecuting criminal misdemeanor cases. She graduated from the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University and also completed a dual degree program at the American University, where she earned her law degree and master's degree in national security. She has received numerous awards and recognitions for her work in the field of nuclear security, including the Secretary's Achievement Award, the highest recognition bestowed upon an employee in the department, both in 2019 and in 2023. And if that's not enough, she also happens to be my mom, which is probably her most impressive achievement. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my mama.
I'm happy to be here tonight to serve as moderator for our panel this evening. Please bear with me, I'm actually recovering from laryngitis, so I'm a little hoarse this evening. I want to start out by introducing our panel of very accomplished panel participants. So first we have Dr. Harmesh Kumar. He is a licensed clinical psychologist with 39 years of experience in the field of mental health with a private consulting practice. He's currently working as a psychologist in the inpatient psychiatric program with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Dr. Kumar also wears numerous other hats. He serves as Dean of International Students at Rayadpara University in India and is establishing collaborative relationships for dual degree programs with American universities. He's owned and operated several California state licensed assisted living and skilled nursing facilities across California and is the founder and president of several nonprofit mental health agencies in California which provide mental health awareness and resources to those who need it most. Additionally, he's trained in the use of controlled force with inmates who are a danger to self and others. Dr. Kumar has received various honors for his professional and community services and his work with others in the mental health and community development has been recognized by President Bill Clinton as well as members of Congress, State Senate, and State Assembly. Currently, Dr. Kumar is running as a candidate for the U.S. Senate. Next, I'd like to introduce District Attorney Jeff Rosen. He's a nationally recognized leader in criminal justice reform. His changes to one of the largest prosecutorial offices in the country include reducing the jail population, diversion programs for nonviolent offenders, expungements for low-level drug crimes, prison reform, and promoting the highest ethical prosecution standards. This all while keeping crime at its lowest rate in decades by vigorously and successfully prosecuting offenders such as murderers, rapists, and drug traffickers. Since 2011, Mr. Rosen has overseen the largest prosecutor's office north of Los Angeles, serving a population of almost 2 million. Mr. Rosen has received numerous awards, including the Justice Award from the Northern California Innocence Project, the Wester Sweet Award for Legal Activism from the NAACP, and the Unity Award from the Minority Bar Coalition, to name just a few. Next, we have Desiree Campbell, the City of Fremont Council member. For over 25 years, Ms. Campbell has dedicated her time to helping the Fremont community. She served students and families on the Fremont Board of Education for the past 10 years and served the Fremont community for over 25 years. She served in several capacities, including being a board member of the Fremont Education Foundation, delegate to the California School Boards Association, former Fremont Human Relations Commissioner, and serving on the Fremont Unified School Board of Trustees, to name a few. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration and a Master's degree in Public Administration and a Master's in Governance. Next, we have Fish Stark, the head of program and curriculum at EverStart. Fish Stark is a child development expert and social entrepreneur with roots in Fremont. After studying under leaders in the child development field at Yale and Harvard, Fish has worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, developing new approaches to education that help children thrive, develop 21st century skills, and prepare for active citizenship. Fish's work has taken him across the world in partnership with organizations such as the Red Cross, the Aspen Institute, and Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation. He is currently the head of program at a California-based education technology startup that develops software that helps children learn essential life skills to prepare them for the future of work. Fish holds a master's in education from Harvard University and a bachelor's from Yale University with a certificate in education studies. Outside of work, he serves on the board of the International Bullying Prevention Association, volunteers with political action groups, and is an award-winning stand-up comedian. Next, we have Ragini Itcham. She's a concerned parent here tonight. She began her career as a business systems and financial analyst for several startups, mid-sized and large companies. Her industry experience led her to co-found a software services company in 2004. Since then, she's been running the company successfully by serving several multinational clients across the US with more than 500 employees. Through her dedication and hands-on leadership skills, she was able to innovate into new areas of growth. Attrition rates were extremely low and employee satisfaction high due to her positive attitude and trust in employees. Ragini holds a master's in business management from NDNU, and additionally she takes care of her family and she graces the stage at Guru Shraddha, an Indian classical dance academy, which empowers nascent entrepreneurs with Thai and weaves threads of compassion through various community tapestries. Next, we have Teresa Kang. Council member Teresa Kang was first elected for a 2-year term to represent North Fremont's District 1 in 2018. She is the first council member to represent North Fremont in 12 years. Councilmember Kang believes that working and creating jobs for a local community is necessary for the economic vitality of Fremont. In 2016, she opened Milk and Honey Cafe, her own small family restaurant business in Fremont. Councilmember Kang also enjoys volunteering for her local PTA and the Fremont Rotary Club. She's fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, Taiwanese, and is studying Spanish. She received a BA in Business and Economics from UCLA. In 2000, she obtained her MS in Traditional Chinese Medicine, and she's currently pursuing a doctoral degree in Education Leadership at San Jose State University. Inspired by her 2 children who are both on the autism spectrum, Councilmember Kang has been passionate about educational equity and fair school funding, particularly those of special needs. So please give us a round of applause for this esteemed couple. So before we delve into our discussion, I'd like to provide some important parameters and context. The objective of tonight's discussion is to be informative and thought-provoking. I'd request to refrain from politicizing the issue and to make sure we focus on the questions being asked and be respectful of all the views presented. A little background on our topic. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives Americans the right to bear arms, and about 1/3 of U.S. adults say they personally own a gun. At the same time, President Joe Biden and other policymakers earlier this year proposed new restrictions on firearm access in an effort to address gun violence ranging from rising murder rates in some major cities to mass shootings. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this issue and why it's so so important, why we're talking about it, I wanted to share a few statistics. Last year, America saw overall death rates from firearms rose to the highest level in nearly 3 decades. The year saw a record number of mass casualty shooting incidents, including several allegedly motivated by hate. According to gunpolicy.org, 75% of the world's 875 million guns are civilian-controlled. Roughly half of these guns, 48%, are in the United States, which has the highest rate of gun ownership in the world. Most American children are just as likely to be killed by a gunshot as they are by cancer. In fact, firearm-related injury is the 2nd most common cause of death for children, accounting for 15% of all child deaths. Last year, more than 600 mass shootings took place in the United States. Every 16 hours, someone in the US is killed by an unintentional shooting. These statistics are incredibly profound and disturbing, and unfortunately there are so many more. But what it tells us is that our country is in crisis, and it's an issue that everyone needs to be thinking about. So with that, I'd like to begin our questions this evening. As I mentioned, we had 600 mass shootings in 22. Those are the ones that grab headlines, but they account for a small percentage for the more than 40,000 US gun deaths recorded in 2022. As far back as 2018, US had about 400 million firearms, more guns than the country's population. Given these numbers, let's set the stage for the current state of affairs. I'd like to direct our first question to District Attorney Rosen. What can you share about the severity of gun violence in our communities?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. One other statistic I would just add that I think illustrates the points you're making is that There have been more mass shootings in the United States this year than there are days in the year. So a mass shooting is defined by the FBI as 4 or more individuals killed in one incident, and there has been more than one incident like that per day in our country this year. Our county is no oasis from gun violence. Gun violence costs our county approximately $1 billion a year in terms of prosecution costs, hospitalization, economic loss, all other kinds of damage, public health expenses. So it's a serious issue in our county, and the approach that we have to take, which I think our panel illustrates tonight, is a multidisciplinary approach that certainly involves law enforcement, but also has to involve mental health and hospitals and schools. So I can just tell you from the law enforcement perspective, we have a crime strategies unit and a gun team in our county that focuses on removing guns from individuals who are not allowed to possess them, from ridding our community of what are called ghost guns, which are guns that are very, very difficult to trace and often are automatic weapons which are not lawful in our state. And in addition, trying to work in neighborhoods where there's a tremendous amount of gun violence to reduce that and make life more livable and better for people in those communities. So those are some of the ways we approach it, but it's really a problem that we think about every day in the district attorney's office, and we devote a lot of resources towards trying to address it.
Dr. Kumar, having had an opportunity to closely interact with several violent offenders, what can you tell us about the triggers or patterns in perpetrators?
Well, thank you, Anjali, for inviting me to this panel. It's a very complicated question, but there are some indicators which psychologically we have found out that people who should do this kind of violence, especially the school shooting. There is all of you could look at it, there is a podcast from LA. It's called laisnotconfidential.com, laisnotasconfidential.com. So I'm going to quote some, this podcast is being done by a psychiatrist, forensic psychiatrist and psychologist. I just attended a conference last week in San Diego, and some of the things which came up there, one major thing about these people is that most of the time, the family members or the near and dear one know about these individuals, that they're going to do something. That's the key factor. Majority of these mass shooting people, they tell either their friends or their family member that they are planning to do something. 60 to 90% of that of the shooter, they tell the family member or loved one. Sometimes they even post it on the social media. That's the one factor. And the second is that they call about 4 Ds. People, those who are normal initially, but they become very suicidal. And people, those who become suicidal, they become very, very disruptive in their behavior. They become very, very dysregulated in their behavior emotionally. They get very kind of suicidalities on top of from 30% to 90% of the shooters. They are shooting because they are suicidal. So we need to recognize mental health as such. There are studies by the Violence Project, and there are only 10% of the cases which has mental health component to it. Mental health, we define people, those who are psychotic, those who have no relationship with reality or they have distorted reality. Only 10% of the shooters are from that category, from mental health. Most of the people with mental health, they don't shoot other people, they hurt themselves. But there is a media narrative that mentally ill people do these things, but mentally ill people are not the one, those who do majority of the shooting. So we have to detach that aspect from it. And The other thing is that recently what we have seen, that people, those who have a grievance or complaint against somebody or against the system we cannot define. And then what we have seen in our country, that we are being divided into different categories by our politicians. And then when you listen to Fox News or listen to CNN, sometimes you wonder if you live in the same country. So some of these people, they've been radicalized because of social media, and they have some internal processes going on, and we do identify those risk factors. Even the leakage, when people, they call it leakage when they tell that I'm going to do something. Even the leakage, they have found that most of the leakage have been found false. Some of the kids say that I'm going to do something and I'm going to do this tonight, but it comes out to be false. So they found out what are the people really who are doing this kind of horrible act. What is different than the majority of the people, those who say they'll do it but they don't do it. So we'll go more on to that.
So, you know, having established these grave circumstances our nation is facing with respect to gun violence, I kind of want to narrow in on the impact this is having on our youth. There were more school shootings in 2022, 46, than in any year since 1999. Since the infamous Columbine shooting, there have been 377 school shootings, which have resulted in more than 349,000 students having experienced gun violence. These numbers are staggering. Specifically, what kind of mental health issues are plaguing our youth? Desiree or you can go ahead and start.
Thank you, Anjali, for that question. Our youth are facing unprecedented mental health issues and challenges, most of which we probably don't think about when we think about social media and the impact that social media is having on our students. Also, the digital impact that social media and being behind a computer has on students and their inability to socialize, their experiences with not developing their social skills adds to their mental anxiety. And certainly we know that COVID-19, the pandemic, played a huge role in the mental health of our children. We also see the fiscal demands that go on in families play a big role, particularly living here in the Bay Area where it's very, very expensive to live and families are struggling financially. That has an impact on our students as well. I think that one of the things that we saw in Fremont Unified is our ability to be able to respond to those challenges that our students are facing. The state has also come up with additional funding that will help support some of the issues that our students are facing as well. But I do think that the problem has always been there, but the pandemic and this virtual schooling had a tremendous impact on our students, and we're hoping that now that they're back in the classroom, that some of this can be alleviated. Thank you.
Just to add to what Desiree was saying, we saw in the most recent Surgeon General's report from Dr. Vivek Murthy that over the past 10 years, we've seen a 40% increase in anxiety and depression, severe mental health issues in young people. Now, if you look at that data longitudinally, if you look at the 90s, starting around 1991, so the 20 years before the last 10 years, it's a pretty straight line, and then around 2012, you see this huge spike. So what happens in 2012? Two things. Number one, that's the age where most American kids start to get smartphones and get on social media, as you were talking about. Number two is Sandy Hook and the advent of the active shooter drill becoming a normal part of kids' lives in schools. And so what's happening in a kid's mind in a world where gun violence violence in their classroom might be an immediate reality. You know, in the work of child mental health prevention, we talk a lot about agency, right? Also referred to locus of control. Do you feel like you are a person who things happen to? Or do you feel like you are a person who makes things happen? And the more instability, the more threat there is in a kid's life, the weaker that locus of control is. Whenever a child is under threat, whether it's from domestic violence or bullying or poverty or the potential of gun violence, their brain development is interrupted by what we call toxic stress, right? They are in fight or flight mode. They are not able to slow down and think. The reason we call it toxic stress is because it acts like a poison, right? It literally impedes the development of new neural pathways, the ability to learn. And I think it's important to use those words, toxic stress, poison, because what we all know is that this is a policy choice, right? This state of school shootings in America, it doesn't happen in Sweden, it doesn't happen in England, it doesn't happen in Germany. It's due to the gun laws we have and the culture we have around mental health. And we need to recognize that it is causing harm and even death, not just in the communities unlucky enough to be touched by horrific acts of gun violence, but in every single kid who goes to school with the possibility of a shooter entering their building, it is putting a poison in their minds. Now, I work in my day job as a social entrepreneur building mental health prevention solutions for kids, and a lot of what parents ask me is, you know, do I talk to my kid about gun violence and school shootings or not? And the answer is yes, right? Talk to them honestly. The best thing you can give a kid is information and an assurance that things can be talked about and are going to be all right. The late, great Fred Rogers said, if it's mentionable, then it's manageable. And it can be hard to have those conversations with kids, but as we saw from Shyla, you can confront those realities of the world and still be brave. And being able, knowing that mom and dad can talk about those things directly is a really important thing for a kid to have.
Exactly. So let's further unpack this issue of violence and mental health. When it comes to guns, I think there's two sides. Often people think that the perpetrators are mentally ill, but the data suggests that mental illness is not the cause of gun violence. We have similar rates of mental illness as other countries, but much higher rates of gun violence. So what are we doing wrong as a society to perpetuate the cycle of violence? District Attorney Rosen, if you would like to take that question, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
The cycle of gun violence plays itself out in many different ways in our community. Certainly we have criminal street gangs where there's one shooting that leads to another shooting that leads to another shooting. That's one kind of cycle that we see. And I shouldn't say we don't just see it and then do nothing about it. We try to intervene when we think that there may be retaliatory shootings and try to prevent that from happening in different ways by bringing in community volunteers and faith leaders to try to calm the waters. Other kinds of cycles of gun violence that we see relate to areas of domestic violence. And we certainly, there are a number of situations we have had in our county where a woman gets a restraining order against an abusive boyfriend or ex-husband, and the woman may report, he has guns in his house. And what we've really begun to focus on is removing those guns in that circumstance. Because honestly, the addition of a gun to most disputes is not something helpful. It generally leads to much worse harm. And so particularly in the environment of conflict in the home, we do everything we can to remove guns in that scenario. And then finally, you mentioned the issues of shootings in schools. And one of the things that we've seen in our county and in other places is individuals, sometimes it's kids that go to school themselves, that they call in a threat to the school and say that someone has a gun there or they have a gun and they're going to shoot someone. And the result of that is the school is evacuated, all of the parents are called, and everyone is traumatized by this incident. And so we're really struggling with ways to try to help our young people not feel as anxious and scared as they are, and also trying to find a way to intervene
So I guess that would then lead us, an extension of that idea is how are we failing to provide mental health support?
So it's really saddening to see that it took a mental health crisis in our youth. For example, the Las Vegas School District had to hurry and open their schools like almost half a year or 9 months earlier than other school districts because they had 15 kids that committed suicide in 2020 to 21. And so after, so many of our kids, our youth, about a quarter of our youth under 25 had contemplated suicide over the pandemic. And in Fremont, I've been serving on the liaison committee with the school district, and before the pandemic, we've been asking for a mental health program for our children, but we always get the answer, there's no funding. But finally, we have finally established a mental health program for our youth last July, and over the last 8 months or so, we had already received more than 14,000 inquiries from our kids ages 5 to 20, and have already provided over 1,400 free therapy sessions, which is the great progress that we have made. However, that program doesn't have a long-term funding. And looking at the program in Fremont schools is mostly funded by the county as well as the school district and the city of Fremont. And the county is having, is probably going to have some financial, deficit, and as the majority of the funding source, that could, very much impact the continuance of our mental health program. So we definitely need to do better and make sure that there's funding for our youth mental health program.
And I'd also like to ask, what are some of the current concerns you have for your own children specifically? I'll turn it over to Ragni, and then I'd like to get your thoughts, Tracy, too. So.
Thank you, Anjali. As you rightly mentioned about how scary it is for parents to experience this moment when you get this lockdown call or an intruder call. We don't really know what exactly is happening in the school. We personally experienced it not too long ago in our own school. Fortunately, it was not a gunman, but it was an intruder. But all the protocols that were followed were to hide out and lock down and things like that. And there are these n number of emotions going on as a parent outside waiting for the child to speak to us. And fortunately, with all these cell phones, they were able to communicate to us. But the anxiety, the stress, not just as a parent, but as kids. Mom, are we going to be okay? Are we going to get out? Versus, we're going to be okay, we're fine, we're protected. In a school like this or in this environment, we are pretty lucky to have enough security, enough guards coming over, enough policemen coming immediately to take care of the situation under control. Versus we feel for all these other schools where they don't have this liberty of immediate help. And that's when parents and even kids, high schoolers, actually start thinking, how is it that we can help? What is it that we can do to make this more safer for all of us?
So both my kids, ages 14 and 11, they are both on the autism spectrum. So over the pandemic, they couldn't understand why the prolonged sheltering in place, all the changes, and they couldn't see their friends, and even some of their favorite restaurants were closed and permanently. And even after I explained, all the goings with it, they both of them developed anxiety actually over the pandemic. And so, the special needs children are definitely suffering and have been overlooked over the pandemic for their mental health needs. But as a special needs parent, in the back of my mind, I always worry, whenever I see these news of a special needs child being stopped by police, and there wasn't adequate training, and because these kids who are autistic are not always verbal and able to communicate who they are and what they're doing. And so, you know, my worst nightmare would be, you know, in the mass shooting event or in the police, you know, activity. If my child is ever questioned and, you know, if he's not able to answer correctly what the police is asking, he may be, you know, he may be questioned, he may be thought of being a suspect. And so that would, you know, definitely be a special needs parent's worst nightmare, and we need to make sure that the police are able to deal with special needs in these situations.
No, of course, it's obviously evident that we are indeed in a state of crisis. So I guess, you know, really the most important part of our conversation this evening is, where do we go from here? And, you know, we'd like to start out with asking Dr. Kumar, in your capacity and with your expertise, what are some of the triggers or signs that we as a society should be able to be looking for to enable us to take preventive action against potential offenders?
You know, most of the shooters, they are telling us, all of us, that we all failed them. We all responsible for their action. That's what they're telling us. When they needed the help, we didn't provide them the help. When they were crying for help, we were not there for them. That's what they're telling us. That if you don't care, I don't care. And most of these individuals, as I said, they are feeling depressed when they do this kind of act. Suicidal. When they have given up on life, given up of everything, they start giving their properties up, their belongings up, and they're telling their friend, this is what I'm going to do. So all of us are, and look around us, what is happening in our country right now. Our systems are failing. We don't respect our politicians. We know why. We don't respect our police department. We know why. We don't respect our teachers. We know why. We don't respect the institutions we are having. There are institutional failures and disrespect for the institutions. Social media. It brings everything in your pocket. Whatever is happening outside, it's coming into your pocket, into your living room through TV sets in your living room. So we need to really pay attention to when people are talking about when people are being fired on the job, when people are being demoted on the job, when people are being having their love broken, their heart broken from love relationship. We have to be very, very extra careful that when we are neglecting these people, how do we lay them off? How do we put a balm on their faces? Because everybody who's anxious, who's depressed, they don't go and kill people. As we heard that there's so much anxiety, so much depression because of this COVID and all other social media triggers we have. But every one of us, including me, at times we all become anxious. At times we all become kind of depressed and sad what's happening around us. But all of us don't go and start killing people. There are certain traits of those individuals, and we need to really take care of those traits and help those individuals. And I'm reminded of a 5 Languages of Love by Gary Chapman. So we need to promote those kind of languages in our families, in our communities, the people we talk to, the kids we talk to, the kids we're dealing with. I work in the prison. And I work with people, those who have done horrible crimes. And when I talk to them, when I sit with them, and they tell me, Doc, I didn't have my mother and father with me. Nobody was taking care of me. I was crying for help. I was sexually abused. I was emotionally abused when I was growing up. There was nobody to protect me. So what do? Then they get into drugs, and when they get into drugs, then we know what happened. Their brains stop functioning. So we need to be very, very careful that let's spread that Gary Chapman 5 languages of love, and there are other languages too. There are not only 5, but there are other. One is act of service, he said, the gifting, the affirmative action, affirmation we give to our loved ones, and then we be with them when they need us the most. And touch, and we have forgotten touch in American society. If we touch somebody, people get aback. What the hell you're doing? So we need to go back to our basic as human beings. And we're living in a virtual reality. And sometimes I admire artificial intelligence, but at the same time, human beings are becoming obsolete. And we need to be very, very careful that we pay attention to these subtleties, what we're going through right now.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Mr. Rosen, would you like to share any final thoughts about actions we can take as a community and as individuals?
Yes, there's something that all of you can do to help reduce gun violence in our community. So I want, if there's anything that you remember I say tonight, I want you to remember this. We have what are called red flag laws in California. And a red flag law works like this. Let's say your neighbor or your coworker is talking about killing people and is angry and is depressed and maybe suicidal. And you know that that neighbor or that coworker has guns, sometimes a lot of guns. What should you do? Call the police. Call the police. The police will investigate. Doesn't mean that your neighbor will be arrested. That might not be the intervention that the police bring with them. It may be a mental health professional. But the police will investigate. And if that person is dangerous and has all those weapons, the police can apply to the district attorney's office and the court to very quickly, and I mean within a couple hours quickly, get a court order to remove those weapons, at least temporarily, at least for a few weeks, to make sure that that person is stable and will not hurt themselves or others. We apply for and receive more gun violence restraining orders. That's where we seize weapons quickly and temporarily than any other county in California. We do more than 300 a year. And initially we needed to train police officers how to do this. But then of course we realized we needed to train the community and educate the community about this, because this is where the police officers will get the leads and investigative tips to do this. This absolutely saves lives every day in our county. And when people don't do this because they say, oh, I don't want to get involved, or I don't want the neighbor to know. You can be anonymous. Your neighbor will never know, your coworker will never know. But when people don't step forward, unfortunately, we've had some serious mass shootings in our county, including at the Valley Transportation Authority, where 9 people were killed with a coworker that had a long history of being very angry at his coworkers and having a lot of guns, and people said, oh, I don't want to get involved in that. So if there's one thing that you can do tonight, is if you see a friend or a neighbor or coworker that is talking about hurting themselves or others and has firearms, please, please call the police. Thank you.
Wow, that's incredibly helpful guidance, and really appreciate that. So finally, a final question of the evening is, how do we help our kids? Fish, please.
So I wanted to talk about what we can do to help our kids with mental health as parents or as anyone who cares about a child, and also what we can do as citizens and civic leaders. First of all, as parents, kids who are anxious, whether it's about the possibility of gun violence or anything else, the simplest intervention, and it's very effective for anyone who's dealing with anxious or depressed thoughts, is to be able to talk about those thoughts to someone who can listen actively and empathetically. Telling kids that they can talk about their worries and feelings that are hard is the first step. Listening, sharing back with them what you're hearing, saying, it is okay to feel that way about these problems in the world is the second step. But the most important step that we often skip, kids are not going to do that until they see you doing it. Kids don't do what they're told, they do what we model to them. We need to talk to our kids about our own feelings, especially when we feel scared, especially when we feel overwhelmed. There are other things we can do, right? Cultivating mindfulness. We all have our own mindfulness practices in our own way so that kids are able to recognize those feelings. Teaching your children the mindfulness practices you have, helping them develop some of their own. And giving kids that locus of control, that agency, where we can. There are things in the world that are scary and that kids can't control. What can we give them a little bit of control over? Maybe letting them introduce us at a talk, right? Or choose what they want to wear to school today. When we give kids a little bit of control over the decisions that affect their own lives, it makes them feel more stable when things come in that they can't control. Now, I know there are a lot of civic leaders in the room and that all of us are civically active. What can we do from that perspective? We need to be investing in mental health prevention, not just intervention. You know, when I was talking to the good folks at the Washington hospital system earlier, whenever I talk to healthcare leaders, what I hear is the healthcare system is straining at the seams to accommodate people who are in active crisis. There is just not the capacity to accommodate all the people who are presenting with serious mental health issues right now. But there are things we can do to prevent those issues from developing, especially in kids. One really promising thing the state of California has done, not many people know about this, is they've just invested 9 figures in a multi-year pilot to deliver peer-to-peer mental health intervention in schools. Those kind of efforts, those innovative efforts that get kids talking to each other, because when we have a problem, what do? We don't reach out to a therapist first, we often reach out to a friend, right? Those kind of efforts that catch those problems before they spiral into something greater are one of the best ways that we can spend our public dollars to keep kids safe and to keep all of us safe.
Thank you, those are fantastic insights and really helpful. And I'd like to finally give Ragini an opportunity as a parent on, you know, what are some of her thoughts dealing with her 2 teenagers and having been involved in this, you know, shooter incident.
I have 1 teenager and a 10-year-old, so I have some time. Well, thank you for all the leads that you've shared and all the ideas. And I think schools obviously are doing a lot of effort in educating and supporting our kids. Social media and the companies who control the social media are the ones that should step up a little more and help society, help our kids educate, and, you know, turn off those videos that come in to constantly show brutality and, you know, shootings and constantly talking about shooting versus what else can we educate our kids with? How do we help? What tools can we give them? You know, come up with games that would help them develop their mental health than just go shoot people, you know, even in video games. So yeah, social media definitely is a bigger play.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to open up the panel to some questions. Please feel free to raise your hand if anyone has any questions for the panel. Yes, go ahead. If you could mind standing up, that'd be helpful so people can hear.
Hello everybody, this is Partha Chami. I came from Afghanistan and I was working for you. So, I can come here. Hello everybody, Bakhtash Jami. I am from Afghanistan. I was working for US Embassy there. So, I'm so, surprised to see these discussions. In Afghanistan, Taliban killed 15,000 people a year. Here, so far, we are not even in the middle of 2023. 11,000 people killed by gun violence. You mentioned one of the panel members. 40% increase. If I go to a doctor, the doctor will test me, diagnose me, give me a prescription. And then if I'm not okay, then I will get a follow-up prescription, a test. Apparently, whatever we did in the past, we didn't do the right thing. Why? What's the right prescription? Don't you think that the panel members, if you summarize all your expertise, I guess there would be 50, 60,000 years of experience in the panel, what would you say? What really is wrong in the system? Yes, social media, what shall we do? There was a gentleman sitting beside me, left. He had another event to take care of. We had a short conversation. And he said we need stricter laws. Why we can't have stricter laws? If we need funding, why we can't have funding? Who needs to do what? And why we can't do it? If Sweden can do it, we should be also doing it here. I want to hear to the bottom of the problem from the panel members, why we are failing to deliver. At the moment, I work for private sector. If I don't deliver based on my KPIs, key performance indicators, they probably change me. Then why nobody asks from people who are responsible at macro level to basically do things what they are required to do? Sorry for being critical, but I'm not shocked because of any cultural thing here in the United States. What I'm shocked is what I did in Afghanistan and got inspiration of what we should be doing in Afghanistan. I don't see it happening here. Thank you.
I wanted to just kind of bring this home because, you know, we've sat here and we've listened to a lot of information, but I think that we have to have some sort of takeaways, the so what question. So what do we do next? And I think our DA mentioned a lot of the things that we could do, and also to that question of we need to lobby our legislators. I mean, we really need gun reform. And we don't necessarily know what that might look like, but we need to be engaged with our legislators so that they understand the impact of gun violence on our communities, for our children, and how it is affecting our children's mental health, our adult mental health for that matter. Because most of us may be shaken to the bones when we see these incidents. Just this last week alone, we have seen several incidences of gun violence. And so I think we really, really need to understand what gun reform means, especially semi-automatic weapons, and what the impact of those weapons and the ability to be able to access those weapons so readily. We need to be able to tell our legislators that this is unacceptable no more.
Thank you, Desiree. I want to thank you for asking this question. As I said earlier, that all of us are responsible what is happening to us, and you are the only one who can change the system. And all of us need to speak up. It's not like Hillary Clinton used to say, it takes a village to raise a child. We have to create that village together. We have to make the foundations again with love. And we're forgetting that. We're giving it all the things to the expert. That expert will solve all the problems we have. And you have seen all of us sitting here and talking sometimes different language. All of us need to get together and create this system which is more caring, more loving. Now we have the power-based model in our country, and we're promoting the same model all over the world. And we're identifying with the aggressor. Whosoever is the aggressor, we're identifying with them. And we need to pay. When Columbine incident happened, somebody asked President Clinton, Mr. President, you are bombarding Kosovo right now. Do you think there is a link between what is happening in Columbine and what happened in Kosovo? And he said, no, I want to focus only on Columbine. I don't want to talk about Kosovo right now. So we need to ask our leaders, those who are making decisions at that level, if we could spend $115 billion in Ukraine, funding them for destroying the country, why can't we fund mental health system in this country? We have to have will of the leaders, and our leaders are failing us at that level. Our family system is broken. Everybody is telling you how to raise your child. They have none of the business to tell you as a parent how to raise your child. You know better because it's your child. You know his minuses, you know his pluses. So we all need to work together so that we could take care of this whole problem. It's not a one-person issue. It's not one field, one expertise that you could solve all these problems. We all need to come together, and that's what it will take. Thank you.
You know, the gentleman asked a really important question, which is, we all are talking about the same solutions, and we all, I think, in this room agree on what a set of solutions look like. Why aren't they happening? And, you know, the difficult truth is because on the other side of these issues, there is a lot of money in the status quo, right? There are gun companies that make money on being able to have this mass availability of weapons, in many cases to people for whom it is dangerous to have them. And when we talk about social media, there are social media companies that are now putting hundreds of millions of dollars, right, into lobbying our state legislators, our members of Congress, to be able to avoid sensible regulation that would allow us to say, hey, we need to make social media a healthy place for kids where we're not actually building algorithms that will glue their eyeballs to content that is going to work their mental health. Until we build a system where the rules are made by people who are responsive to all of us, not a small group of people, we are not going to have a system that works for all of us, and especially for kids who have the least power, who have the least voice. We need to uplift leaders who are committed to doing things differently, who are committed to listening to sensible voices, even when big money is pushing them the other way. We have those leaders in our community right now. You know, we have Tom here from Congressman Khanna's office. Congressman Khanna has been a great leader in rejecting PAC and lobbyist and corporate contributions and saying he wants to be accountable to people. That's the systemic problem that makes it hard to do these things in America. But it's something that we can stand up and support leaders who are pushing back and changing the tide in the other direction.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I also have a quick question too.
Okay.
Yeah, so my name is Rewan. I'm 16 years old and I'm a student activist. And I wanted to maybe inquire about a topic that may have not been touched yet. It's easy to be fooled by our local demographic, but one of the most important factors that's related to gun violence is indeed race. In fact, almost 68% of African Americans report that either them or their local family members have been affected by gun violence. So I'm wondering, what do we owe to these people in these communities?
I'm so happy that you asked that question, my friend. I just bought this book, Social Injustice and Mental Health. And this book has the data for many, many years. And this book is written by two Afro-American forensic psychiatrists. And they have given the reference with data how race is impacting what we do. And we have systematic, institutionalized barriers. Even people, those who have spent 30 years in prison, when they come out, there are 58,000 laws on the books which prevent them not to get integrated into the community. 58,000 laws created by our legislators. So we really need to look at the system, what system we are promoting and how we're doing this. And that 5 languages of love is the key thing. And it should be spread all over equally, fairly, so that we could have the system which is more caring, more loving, more nurturing to everybody, irrespective of where they're coming from race, from gender, from nationality, language, caste, whatever you call it. We should be free from that discrimination. And there is a program which comes on NPR every week. Most of you may be hearing it on the NPR, Hidden Brain. And you should listen to that, how we all have implicit biases. Sometimes unknowingly, unconsciously. And it's done by Shankar Vedantam, one of the Indian guys. Listen to that hidden brain, how we operate as individuals. We all have those voices within us, and we need to shake them.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. If you look at the data, the average Black American makes 1/7 of an income or wealth of a white American. And because of decades of systemic racism and redlining, poverty, that doesn't allow them to build those generational wealth and send their kids to school and allow family stability. So definitely one of the, we were talking about, instead of just intervention, we need to have the prevention, is to make sure that these kids have the resources, have the access to education and good jobs. Because working at a minimum wage job is not going to provide them a living in the Bay Area. So people, they are attracted to gang violence and gang activities, and definitely that would be something that is a top priority for us.
I want to just add an additional comment to that question. Thank you for that question. But, being a woman of African descent and living in America, born and raised in America, I can say that what I have experienced and what my family has experienced in our own life is this whole institutionalized racism. I mean, it exists, and it is part of a way of thinking and a way of thinking about yourself, and because you internalize this perception of who you are and who you're supposed to be based on a society that wants you to assimilate into a culture that's not your own. So this is a very, very difficult question to answer, especially if you're not living in the shoes of someone who is an American of African descent. So I just want to bring that out, that it's very, very complicated. It has a lot to do with how we internalize what other people think and feel about us, and how we continue to be in an environment that perpetuates that, and how we are raised and how we are taught to think about ourselves as individuals in America. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. Go ahead. Can we get him a mic, please? Thank you.
Okay. My question is to our DA. According to the 1998, the schools were basically gun-free zones, where unauthorized people are not supposed to carry guns. There's a 1990 Act, which basically deters people to carry guns in the school. Yet we still see killing, etc. So, have you ever thought of creating a program where small businesses, places of worship, whether it's nightclubs, etc., can enroll into and put a sticker out of their businesses saying gun-free zone? It will not, protect from somebody coming and shooting around, but it will create an awareness. The reason why I'm bringing up, today morning I went to Kaiser Hospital at San Leandro, and I saw a big sticker out there, gun-free zone. And I thought, if this is well advertised around every small business in the city, every schools, every colleges, every mosque, temple, gurdwara, then it creates an awareness that this society is against guns.
Thank you very much for that question. I think that's really an excellent point because it's an example of something that we individually and collectively can do, which is to say, yes, on the one hand, there are more guns than people in the United States, and in our county, there are about 28,000 guns legally purchased each year in our county. There are thousands of other guns that are illegally purchased or illegally made. We're just awash in guns. But I think that your suggestion that schools, that individuals that have businesses can say, here, this is a gun-free zone. And it's a way of saying, look, these are what our values are. Like, we don't, guns is not going to help any problem or situation get better. It's just going to make it worse. And we want to say that we don't want guns here. And that's perfectly lawful to say that in a private business. You can set the rules for that. And of course, it's not surprising that places like nightclubs do not allow guns in nightclubs for a very good reason. And it seems like there's perhaps other businesses that could do that as well. And the last point I would make about violence and shootings that happen in schools is, on the one hand, there's an impulse to want to remove police officers from schools, or what are called community services officers, because of concerns that students' conduct is going to be school resource. Yeah, to remove school resource officers with the idea that, well, they're going to criminalize the conduct of young people. It's going to disproportionately affect communities of color, and so we shouldn't have police officers / school resource officers there. You know, what I would just say respectfully from my position as the district attorney is that schools that have removed school resource officers are in the process of bringing them back because it makes the students feel safer, makes the parents feel safer, and when there are incidents at the school between students or somebody coming off the campus and coming onto the campus to start a problem, there is already a school resource officer there, as opposed to having to call 911 and then waiting for a response. And as we know, every minute, every second in a volatile situation is crucial. So I think in terms of gun-free zones for private businesses, I think that's an excellent idea. And I would just say that I think that from what I've seen, school resource officers are a net benefit for the safety of students when they're at school.
Thank you. Well, I would like to thank our panelists for such an informative and much-needed conversation. I hope the audience really had an opportunity to hear some pressing points and some good key takeaways. So please give our panelists a round of applause for a wonderful conversation. And before I step off, I actually have the honor of introducing our next speaker. So we have Mayor Matthew Mahon with us this evening. And he is an American politician and tech entrepreneur, now serving his first term as mayor of San Jose. He previously served as the District 10 council member representing the Alameda Valley, Blossom Valley, and Vista Park neighborhoods in 2005. Mayor Mahon graduated from Harvard University in 2005, and after Harvard, he spent the next year building irrigation systems in Bolivia. He then joined Teach for America. In 2008, he joined a tech startup led by Sean Parker and Joe Green, and together they formed Causes, an early Facebook application focused on grassroots and public engagement that helped raise money for nonprofit engagements. Mayor Mahon became CEO and president of Causes in 2013. And in 2014, he launched Brigade, which was created as a social medium for civil engagement. And in 2019, it was acquired by Pinterest. And Shortly after, in 2021, he was sworn in as the District 10 council member and subsequently as the mayor. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mayor Mahan.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me, and good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Good, all right, good. Really happy to be here, and honored to have the opportunity to give you a quick address here as part of your program. I really love this concept of a unity dinner. I know this is the 22nd annual unity dinner. It's a really beautiful idea. I want to thank Javon and Rahul Zuchi, who I know are founders of the Indo-American Community Federation, and Anjali, who's just kind enough to introduce me, and I believe Shyla, their daughter, or youngest panelist, who's been raising awareness on gun violence. So really appreciate the support from the family. Mr. Dr. Ramesh Kanda, great to have you here. I didn't know, were you going to say anything? Or no? You want me to just jump in? Okay. So I'll try to be brief. I thought that what I would do, and I'll try to move it along here, but just give you a quick update on some of the things we're doing in the city of San Jose to better address violence in the community, particularly gun violence. I know you just had a panel on that topic, so I thought I'd just highlight a few things quickly. You know, as you might expect, one area of focus, of course, is enforcement. San Jose is very understaffed when it comes to our police department. We are committed to implementing best practices of community policing, but when you're way behind on your response times, when you're just quickly rushing from priority one call to priority one call, it's hard to actually get out of the car and walk the beat and get to know people and really be rooted in the community and build authentic relationships. So we do need to get staffing levels to a place where our officers can take a breath and get out into the community and build relationships. Just to put it in perspective, we are about 15% larger than San Francisco, about 160,000 more residents, about 16% larger. We have fewer than half as many police officers. So that's been a challenge for us ever since our pension challenges and the Great Recession. So we are still rebuilding the department. As we do that, though, we're really hoping, and I've been an advocate for narrowing the types of calls we respond to. There are a lot of calls to 911 that do not require an officer with a badge and a gun to be the first responder. Mental health related calls, calls involving youth, calls involving our unhoused communities. So we're trying to be smarter about sending an alternative response when appropriate. And we've had some examples of programs that have been very successful. Our MCAT unit, which is sending officers who have special training in de-escalation, have responded now to over 2,000 mental health related calls without having one violent episode. And I really think part of that is just those extra hours of training and really learning how to respond to a mental health related call. We're really grateful to our partners at the county who have, and I think we frankly need more investment in this, but programs where we actually send a trained clinician, not even an officer. So I think that's very promising. We also have a new unit that is focused on ghost guns in particular. As you probably know, a growing amount, in fact in San Jose now, a majority of our gun-related violent episodes involve ghost guns, which are unserialized, untraceable weapons. So we're putting more emphasis on tracking the manufacture of those and doing enforcement. We've had some pretty highly publicized interventions where we've actually found homes in San Jose where they're being manufactured. And that's never for a good reason, let me tell you. You also may have heard, this is maybe the most innovative thing we've been doing. We passed some new gun laws that went into effect January 1st. We're the first city in the country to require liability insurance if you want to own and keep guns in your home. And the theory here is, like any other liability insurance that tries to price risk, we know that having guns in your home increases the likelihood of an accident or of non-accidental use of the gun, and so we are trying to incentivize insurance companies to ask tough questions of gun owners. Do you have a gun safe? Do you have a child safety lock? And actually use risk-adjusted premiums, just as you would have if you have a pool in your backyard or even a trampoline. Your insurance company wants to know that, and your premiums are adjusted based on your risk factors. And so we now actually have a policy that requires that those who keep guns in their home actually be in possession of an insurance policy with general liability to cover gun-related accidents. We also have a fee. It's not meant to be punitive, but gun owners must actually pay a $20 to $30, we haven't implemented it yet, but it'll be around $20 to $30 per year. And that money will go to local nonprofits that invest in supporting victims of domestic violence, doing more education around gun restraining orders, basically getting the information out to ensure that the community knows how themselves to better manage the issue of gun violence. At the local level, we can't do a lot about gun ownership, but we can do more to mitigate its impacts and make sure that we're investing in education and gun violence protection, and particularly protecting vulnerable residents. We know domestic violence is a very serious issue and often, sadly, is a more lethal issue when a gun is involved. But beyond that, so I talked a little bit about enforcement and some regulatory things that we're doing. We also know, thinking holistically, that we have to get lower in the stack and think about the conditions that lead to violence, whether with a gun or not. And that's really about investing in our youth. We're expanding after-school programs, particularly targeting our census tracts, where we have the highest levels of unemployment, the highest levels of violence. We've got to get in earlier. We are thinking more holistically about what equity means. We're looking at all of our city services and using data analysis to help us understand how effectively we're delivering basic services, particularly to our traditionally underserved neighborhoods. So we have a new scoring system for the quality of our parks. We score our roads every year. We have a very comprehensive report now on, it may sound very simple and not that important, but tree canopy cover. And it matters. We have districts with significantly better tree canopy cover. And the research shows that neighborhoods that are better shaded are cooler, and they actually have less violence, believe it or not. People's mental well-being is better when they're in a neighborhood that is surrounded with nature, and they have shade, and the air is a little bit cleaner. And so we're really trying to look at basic city services and resources that we're responsible for, and making sure we're bringing every neighborhood up to a level that we think is acceptable. Of course, beyond that, maybe I'll end on this point, our biggest challenge is lack of housing. And I really think that at a fundamental level, economic insecurity, when people are spending 50% of their income on rent and have no savings, and are terrified that if they lose their job, they're going to end up on the streets. That's not an environment that's conducive to thriving children and happy parents and the kinds of outcomes that we want. And on that front, I mean, the reality is this. It is a failure of public policy. We have regionally added 6 jobs for every 1 home we've built over the last decade plus, a couple decades now. It's great that we have a vibrant economy. I don't want to slow that down. And in fact, now that we're seeing companies lay people off, I mean, we should all be really grateful for the incredible innovation and the engine of economic growth and prosperity that we have here in Silicon Valley. But you can't have that without doing the other things, without investing in infrastructure, particularly transit and mass transportation infrastructure, and enabling the building of homes. And so in San Jose, we are working hard to do the pre-planning, to streamline permitting, to make it easier to build up in our downtown, in North San Jose, near all of our transit corridors. We do need to be thoughtful about it. We don't want to build up Coyote Valley. We don't want to densify the periphery of the city and just double our traffic congestion and air pollution. But there are plenty of places in San Jose, and I would argue across the region, where the future is going to be building up in mixed-use, walkable environments. And those environments, I think, can be more livable and more affordable because we'll better match supply and demand. So the list goes on, but I think we have to really think, when we talk about violence, even something as specific as gun violence, I do think we have to think holistically about the constellation of policy issues that contribute to a community that's either thriving, has lower stress levels, and people are happier and better educated and have more opportunity, and those that don't. Clearly, as a region, we face some real challenges, some of them being victims of our own success. We've grown so much and really struggled to manage that growth in a way that's good for our families and for our kids. So I could go on, but I just appreciate the opportunity to share a quick update from the city of San Jose, some of the things that we've been working on, and please feel free to reach out to our office anytime. You can find my contact information on the city website. We've got a newsletter that goes out to about 70,000 people every other week with policy updates and opportunities to volunteer and get involved. Would love to connect with you and see you out at one of our community cleanups or other service activities. And again, appreciate the spirit in which you've all gathered this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address the great gathering here. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mayor Mahan, for your valuable insights. And we had really exciting panel discussion on one of the hottest and emerging topics. Every day you see in the news, newspaper, discussions everywhere, we see this as a huge topic, not only causing general discussion, but it's also causing depression, anxiety, and all other factors you can think of. The panel members already shared with us. So, as per our agenda, I think we are 15 minutes running behind, but we have almost like 35 elected officials going to be there in this room shortly after the break. We are going to take a break for the social hour, and we have wonderful dinner outside, snacks. Please help yourself, and we'll regroup here by 7:15. Then we'll start the main program. And in the hallway outside, Tim Riley, the Canyon Band, they are going to have the music, and also we have the host bar. Please help yourself, and we'll reconvene here in another half an hour at 7:15. Please help yourself for the dinner and snacks and pictures and all the social greeting is happening in the outside. Thank you so much for your attention, and thanks for the big round of applause to the panel members.